More than 6 months have passed since world leaders met in Glasgow for the COP26 conference. A lot of promises were made back then, promises that later got diluted as a result of the world's geopolitical crisis. And now, as countries once again prepare for the United Nations Climate Summit, the focus remains on rallying efforts for our planet. In the run-up to the COP27 summit to be held later this year, negotiators from around 200 countries have gathered in the German city of Bonn, where they are charting out a plan for the Egypt summit. The Bonn conference began on the 6th of June and will continue till the 16th of this month. Making her inaugural address at the conference, the United Nations outgoing climate chief urged the leaders to not lose hope and continue fighting for the planet that we call our home.
And I would like to start by recognizing... I appeal to all of you, especially in these difficult and challenging times, not to lose hope, not to lose focus, but to use our united efforts against climate change as the ultimate act of unity between nations. We must never give in to despair. We must continue to move forward.
This is the first major climate summit after the Russian invasion of Ukraine sparked a geopolitical and energy crisis. Back in November 2021, countries pledged to eliminate or at least phase down the use of carbon in the coming years. But given the reality of a war raging on in Eastern Europe, many have gone behind their promises and ramped up the use of fossil fuels as opposed to cutting down on them. Speaking on the urgency of climate action and its evident sidelining because of the war, the UN climate chief said, and I'm quoting, "We require political level interventions and decisions in each of these areas in order to achieve a balanced package. Doing so will send out a clear message to the world that we are headed in the right direction, because the world is going to have one question in Sharm el-Sheikh: what progress have you made since Glasgow?" Almost all governments around the world have accepted the reality and the dire threat of climate change. They have also advocated for immediate action to cut fossil fuel emissions to meet the Paris Accord target, that is limiting warming to a 1.5 degrees Celsius rise. But as things stand, the world is unlikely to be able to meet the Paris commitment to limit warming well below 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. For more on this, with us on the broadcast is Dr. Paul Dorfman from Paris. He is an Associate Fellow in the Science Policy Research Unit at the University of Sussex. Good to have you with us. Thanks very much for being here. I want to begin by asking you the question that has also been raised time and again. What progress have countries around the world made since Glasgow? There has been a certain backward approach in a way as a result of the Russia-Ukraine war and the resultant rise in the use of fossil fuels.
For 30 years, people like me and many others have been deeply worried about the issue of climate change. So that more recently, in the last 5 years or so, people have been waking up to this existential threat. Well, that's very, very good. Indeed, we've seen a kind of something that's actually very, very hopeful in the last few years or so. We've known about this for 3 decades, so it's extraordinary that we haven't acted upon this sooner. Now, in terms of what's really going on, we're in deep trouble. And the effects of climate change, as you know, of course, in India are here and are extreme. The key issue about all of this is that we all, as the UN have said, and it's also important to note that these meetings, the recent meeting has gone on in Germany. The Germany Energiewende, energy transition, the non-nuclear energy transition, perhaps is the leading way to approach the problems that we have with climate change. So if get back to your question. If the question is, what's happened since Glasgow? Well, Ukraine has happened. Despite Ukraine, things are progressing. The reality is the renewable evolution is here, and that's a cause for great hope.
Right. Let me ask you, the resultant oil and food crisis as a result of the Russia-Ukraine war has only added pressure on countries around the world. So mitigating those crises while also taking climate action is the overall challenge. And how can countries really do that, according to you?
That's an enormous question. And essentially, that's a social and political question as well. I mean,
Yes.
The reality is we live together or we die together. The fact is that we need to look at our cultural and social norms. We need to look at the imbalances of equalities. We need to look at all of these issues in order to really get to grips with what's going on. And when one looks at the younger generation, one can see that this is beginning, just beginning to happen. In the same way, as I said, people like me have known about climate change for 30 years or more, but we're just beginning to get to grips with this, with this key existential problem.
Thanks very much for being here with us and sharing those perspectives. We will, of course, continue to have these conversations and highlight the impact of the war on the fight against climate change as well. WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.